This is how we start every meeting at TI, by the way. So I know we would think that after like COVID, so many years of practice, but like, I kid you not, he's like, oh, I'm on mute. All right. So, no, so we'll kind of walk through that, and then really want there to be, again, active, interactive sessions. If you guys have questions, definitely ask. I think probably, some decent content in the slides, but probably more of the value is going to come from some of the back and forth. So a little bit about me. So I'm Morgan Lawler. I'm a field applications manager in Southern California. So I'm based out of our San Diego office. So live down in Carlsbad. Been with TI for 14 years. Feel old, honestly. It feels like I was not that long ago that I was sitting in a seat, like hearing somebody talk to TI, to me. But had a number of different roles. So I've spent some time in our field sales organization, as well as our business unit, to where I've led systems and applications teams for audio product lines, and as well as marketing. So some different aspects across different functions at TI as well.
Yeah, and for those on Zoom, we had said it when I think we have Denise in the chat. So if any questions come in on chat, I don't know why I'm looking at this if I think that that's a camera. I apologize. So Denise is on chat in the Zoom. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. So my name is Lindsey Fike. I'm a field applications engineer. I've been with Texas Instruments for 3 years now. I'm out of the Irvine. Prior to TI, I worked at a couple different companies in Southern California area as a component engineer and a systems engineer. So go to the next slide. Okay, so we talked about interactions. So this will be the first one. How many people know Texas Instruments and think that we are a calculator company? Show of hands. Listen, there's no shame here. So that's what most people know us from, is the fact that Texas Instruments invented the handheld calculator, but we also invented the integrated circuit. So we have, I think, 80,000 active part numbers. So we sell a very wide portfolio of semiconductors. So we're really focused on the analog space. We have about 19% here, but we definitely have an embedded as well with processors. So 18 billion last year. So definitely sell much more than calculators. And I think when I started at TI, somebody said, and I have found this to be true, it would be very difficult to design just about any kind of electronic device without a Texas Instrument part. You would pretty much have to be trying to not use a part that TI sells. Clicking forward. Yep. So some of the industries we play in, considering that it's pretty much all electronics, we focus heavily in the industrial and automotive space, but we still have a lot of customers in the personal electronics, communication, and enterprise space. Obviously, those are all growing as well, and we have products that we promote across all of those different sectors. So definitely a very wide reach that we get to see as far as the people that use our products and the amount of designs we get to see and influence. So I'll pass it back over to Morgan to jump into the technical interviewing.
Just to hop in really quickly, because I think this was something that was really exciting for me when I joined TI. I'm probably the newer person here, so class of 2021. A lot of times you start your career and you're focused just on one thing, and that's all you're really going to do. But with TI, you get to do a plethora of what we call end equipment. You're working with multiple customers, multiple devices, so you really get to know a lot of different markets and where our parts. So think about that too when you're thinking about what kind of company you look into. Is do you really want to be stuck in one shelf or in one space, or do you really want to know multiple equipments and pieces? And I think that was exciting for me in choosing TI, as I knew I had multiple options within the organization to work with all of these customers. Basically, like Lindsey said, we're in every single thing that you own pretty much in the electronic space. And so I get to go to my friends and say, yeah, whatever you're holding in your hand, whatever you have at home, we're in there, we're a part of that. And that actually feels really great to know that my organization is so impactful across the industry.
Yeah, just to add on to that a little bit, so all of us are in the field sales organization, but, obviously there's a number of other roles, at Texas Instruments, be it design roles for IC design, engineering roles in our business unit supporting, a product line, so maybe like if you're in charge of DC-DC converter support, systems roles for basically doing the product definition for new devices. But a little bit just real quick on the field side, I remember being excited when I accepted my offer to go into sales at TI, and I told a couple of my professors, and they were just like, I felt like disappointment on their face. They're like, why did you go into sales, right? But one of the things that's we really enjoy, and I lead the more technical team on the applications, we get to work with so many different customers to help design in these parts, which really what that means is it's not, don't think of it as kind of a used car salesman type situation. It's more, you really get to go deep technically on architectures, right? You could be working with, Amazon, working with their team, Lab 126 on kind of the next generation of, Alexa product. On my team in Southern California, we also support Medtronic. So which is really, cool for me personally, because I feel like we get to have a helping hand in kind of, some of the biggest medical devices that are manufactured worldwide. So just maybe something to think about when you're looking at what types of roles, because I know that's always a challenge. Hey, what do I go interview for? So when you think of the field or sales, a little bit different maybe than what you would normally think of. All right, next slide.
Sit down.
Okay. So we said there's no shame in this room. Truth be told, there may not be like anything earth shattering on this slide per se, but I do want to hit on a couple of things. Before any interview, just taking some time to understand, a little bit about the company. One thing that I found useful is, even if you just, search kind of the news for the company recently, take a look back over the last quarter, get a feel for, if you looked at TI, you'd see some press releases on where we're actually investing in a lot of new fab capacity. As everybody in this room's probably felt like there's a big shortage of, it feels like everything these days, semiconductors included. And so we're investing a lot on the fab side for basically fabs in Dallas and in Lehigh, Utah. So like that could be one thing that maybe as you're looking through, you say, hey, I see that there. How does that apply to this role? I think it gives something to kind of think about as you're looking into the interview and prepping for it. Another thing to think about too is look at the job postings and really think about what questions you have. I feel like the interview, I guess if I go back probably 5 to 10 years, it felt like the interview oftentimes was really more so like, okay, I have to sell myself to this company. I think nowadays, the honest truth is there's so many different job offers out there and opportunities that interview is such equal part for you to be able to say, is this company actually a good fit for me? Right? Because that's as important as if you're a good fit for the company. So take a look at some of those things and start thinking about what questions you have, how would you prepare for that? And even on the on the interview itself, right? And we'll talk through a little bit more about this, but there's going to be certain things in a technical interview that you're not going to know the answer to every question, right? And that's, I think, by design, right? If you did, then you're either a technical rock star or the company did a bad job, kind of challenging you probably on thought process and technical questions. But, really take a step back and show your thought process. There's been a number of folks that I've actually been on the final interviews for this past year that I hired them and truth be told, they kind of whiffed on the technical interview questions, but they got so much of it, they got far enough along the path just because they were talking out loud and showing their thought process. It was actually really encouraging to me to see, they would figure this out, right? If they get stuck on something, they would go back, they would, leverage their resources to figure out how to go solve this problem, in front of our customer, right? So I think, be yourself, really a great opportunity to, again, show how you think and kind of get that across to the interviewer. Outside of what's up here, what else have you seen effective? Anybody have anything that they've done as part of preparation that they found useful? Sure. We're going to get t-shirts for participation, but we failed at that. We already need t-shirts, so we need you to participate. Perfect.
Yeah, if company gives you the name of the interviewer, I would just look them up on LinkedIn and look at specializing, those are probably where the interview questions are coming from.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So I'll probably challenge you on that. When you're setting up the interview, do you ask who's going to be the person interviewing you?
Good question. I don't.
So you should. If you guys don't know who's going to be the one asking you questions, you should definitely know who your audience is. So if they haven't been transparent with you about who's going to be in that room with you, ask that as they're setting that up so that you can do that research, because it is important as far as connecting with people to understand their background.
No, that's a great point though, too, because and I know some people get worried. They're like, well, is the person going to see that they looked them up on LinkedIn before the interview? I mean, I never really thought about that, but I would actually be encouraged if I saw that and be like, wow, you're going out of your way to prepare. Like, that's goodness, right?
You go on like a transparent, not transparent. You just hide your profile.
You can do that too. Yeah. Good example. Anybody else have anything that they've done as prep? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, so for those on Zoom, really taking a look at maybe some of the challenges the company is working through and seeing where maybe some of your personal experiences and examples could kind of layer in on that. Yeah, that's really good. And I think one of the only other things to think about too is take a look at, a big part of kind of that fit discussion we talked about a little bit, in terms of, is the company a good fit for you? A big part of that, for me personally is, the ethics piece as well, right? And the culture. There's a lot of good material on TI.com where we're very open about our culture, right? Building a company that we would want and be proud to have as our neighbor, right? And I think that's another good place to kind of look at and see if you've got some personal examples, maybe that you can, tie back in naturally throughout the interview. All right, attitude is everything. So on the flip side, I've had people that have just crushed the technical interview, but they were so ultra confident and like closed-minded that I was like, there's no way that I would want this person on my team, right? So with everything, there's balance, right? So I think for me personally, one big thing is humility. And throughout the interview, having an opportunity to show, again, we talked about thought process, but even where you're not strong, right? And it's not, I think it's unnatural for us to want to talk about those things, but taking a step back and maybe one of the questions saying, hey, I haven't actually taken that course yet, I'm slated to do that in the spring or whatever the case is, or I know that happens weakness for mine. Here's what I would do to try to get caught up with my started, right? That's a big deal, right? Because how many times are we in meetings and to be able to say, I don't know, especially in our roles in front of the customer, that they'll, if you try to kind of work your way through that and act like like they'll see right through it, right? So it really helps us to establish credibility and create a good partnership. Yeah, I think one of the other most important things, be yourself, right? Every now and then you'll see folks kind of fall victim to kind of trying to fit whatever mold they think you're interviewing for. We really just want to kind of get to know you, right? And just kind of what skill sets and what qualities you have. And I also think it's, it may not sound like rocket science again, but it's tough sometimes, right? Throughout the course of an interview, you may kind of get signals of what you think somebody's wanting to hear, and really trying to be grounded in yourself is a big deal. And it's going to make it easier on you too, right? Hopefully it's pretty easy to be yourself, right? As you're working through it. The last one I want to hit on is enthusiasm. It's going to be tough to want to move forward on the next step if it doesn't seem like you're excited about the role, right? So, it doesn't need to be like artificial, but, nowadays video interviews, just kind of, showing you're, excited or, smiling from time to time, right? Showing some of that enthusiasm is really key. Any questions here? Yeah, next slide.
I have one.
Yeah.
So these days, almost all the interviews are online. So how do you guys actually judge people? Because online interviews are a little difficult to tell if they mean that.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I mean,
So that's on the next slide.
yeah. I'll hit some of it now though, because it's hard, right? It's definitely harder, even for us too, right? It's harder on each of you, totally understand that. It's equally as challenging on our side because it's so much easier to sit in a room across from somebody and get a good feel for who are they. You already have a short amount of time anyways, right? You have an hour if you're lucky. Some of the things I personally look for is just, as I'm having a conversation with somebody, how are they interacting in a conversation? Are they helping kind of carry the conversation, or are they just waiting for me to kind of ask the next question, right? So looking for some of those interpersonal skills to see, in our roles, would I be confident you'd be able to step in front of a customer and kind of carry on a conversation about a technology that you might not know everything about? But even for other roles at TI, right? Could you step into a design role in a design review meeting, and would you be willing to kind of step up and ask questions and participate, from a design team maybe that's been doing these parts for 10 years, right? So I think that's one piece of it. And then also just looking for, if you have an opportunity to kind of, through some of the behavioral questions that we ask, like you're gonna have a chance to show examples, right? So what we do on our side is what we call behavioral interviews. I think it's somewhat common. I haven't interviewed for a lot of companies recently, so I don't have a great feel. But what we look for is, one of the questions we may ask is, tell me about a time that you established trust with somebody that was really difficult, right? What did you do? How did you approach it? And there's not a right answer we're looking for. We're really more looking for, what was your thought process? There's probably, through a lot of those questions, there's an element of struggle. How did you navigate that, right? If you just stopped and said, well, it was hard, I didn't do it, well, that may not be the best answer, right? So some of it also comes out through some of the behavioral questions we'll ask.
We have a couple of slides on behavioral, and then we'll probably skip forward to the technical and have you guys read through some of the slides, because we're about 30 minutes in here. But from a tactical perspective, test your audio before a virtual interview. Make sure you're in a quiet area and make sure there's good lighting. I also encourage you not to be using your second monitor, because if it looks like you're looking off screen, it makes it really hard for people to feel like they're having a conversation with you. And then at that same time, like for a technical interview, you're gonna want to have all your notes in front of you, right? There's that urge to be prepared, to be able to quickly Google something. It would be better if you didn't. Because if you have all those things around you, if you have that second monitor and you're constantly reaching for those things, it will look as though you're distracted to the person you're interviewing with. And you should try to treat it as if it was an in-person interview, with the eye contact you're making, with the effort you're making not to reach for some of those resources that you could have because they could see it, but you wouldn't have them if you were in person. And so it's better to treat it as if it was that than to try to lean on things that you have because it's virtual, because it leads to some poor behaviors that don't show well on camera.
Yeah, those are really good points. Another very tactical one, as Lindsey was talking, that came to mind. I stay very close with one of my advisors from when I graduated back in 2008. And he was telling me a horror story actually of an interview in this last year, that the student was crushing the interview. They were doing really well. And towards the end, the interviewer asked him, said, "Hey, will you stand up?" "What do you mean stand up?" And I said, "Well, I want to see how serious you took this interview." And he was wearing gym shorts. And I was like, "You gotta be kidding me." We would never do that on our side, but for what it's worth, something to think about though, because some employees, you never know how they may take some of that. But I was blown away by that. Yeah, that was an actual example from last year. It's like, "So did you get the job?" It's like, "I did not get the job." So all right, with that, we'll transition here to some of the technical questions.
Yeah, some of the slides I went over showed some characteristics, are you a problem solver? How do you show that you're smart? So that material probably got covered in your behavioral interviewing skills. So I want to jump forward to the technical. So here's some examples of questions that we ask in a lot of our technical interviews. But before I dive too deep into this, just show of hands, how many, not exactly if you're electrical engineering majors, but how many within your guys' major have taken just a basic circuits class? Like that's for like mechanical and computer engineering does that too. Okay, so the majority of the room. Okay, I really apologize to those that didn't, because we might not be super applicable, but the second example will be better for you. So we do often ask a lot of analog-based questions because it is the majority of our portfolio and because it's the basics, right? When you study most disciplines of engineering, whether it's mechanical, whether it's computer, whether it's electrical, most people have had exposure to a basic circuits class. So it's like the core understanding, whether you can apply that and speak to it as far as what are the complexities that go into it is often what we push people towards. I think Morgan hit on it earlier. We might ask you a question, and if you know it, we're gonna then ask you a harder question. And the reason why we're trying to do that is we're trying to get to the point where it's the edge of your knowledge so that we can then see how you deal with questions you do not know the answer to, because that tells us more about your ability to solve technical challenges. Because at the end of the day, what you learn in school is fundamental, and they're going to have to train you on whatever role you take after you graduate. There's no way any one school can prepare you for every job that you could potentially have when you leave university. It's impossible. So learning how somebody tackles things they don't know is more important than understanding what they do know. So jumping forward, I'm going to give an example of something I gave an opportunity to share experiences. Does anyone have an example of that? Has anyone had a technical interview where they like purposefully ask you something they think you don't know? Or what the hardest technical question you've been asked is and how you dealt with that?
In the firm which I worked earlier, so it was a communication firm, and I was not done with my networking class and all that. I was actually going through it. So the person, I told him that this is something which I haven't studied completely, but I'm studying. So it so happened that he did still continue asking me questions on the same lines. I was able to answer a couple of them because I had initial classes there. But then he asked me questions on further in the course. I attempted it, but eventually I learned that okay, this was something which he tried to push my limits and know how I react with something which I don't.
I mean, that's the perfect way to approach it, right? You set the expectation of, I have not completed this course. So I am going to have a baseline understanding, but I probably won't be able to answer all your questions. But based on what I do know, I'm going to try to answer the questions to the best of your ability, right? As much as it's great for you to be able to say, I don't know this answer, or let me tell you what I do know about this to try to get there. It shouldn't just be, no, I don't know the answer. Because if you stop there, that shows very poorly. Like take that next step to say, I don't know this, but here's what I do know, and here's how I work to get that answer for you if I didn't know it off the bat. So kind of jumping to that, can anyone, oh yeah, sorry. I can't see what's behind me. Okay, so here's like a question we ask in just about every interview, if you end up interviewing for TI, is could you draw a passive or high pass filter? Can anyone raise your hand and describe it to me?
Yeah, just simple RC circuit.
Mhm.
You just connect R to the ground. So you pass. High frequency. So you would pass like stuff.
Okay, so I like that. Yeah, it's just a simple RC circuit. Okay, so you touched on that, so I'm going to make you answer that first question, which is my follow-up question. If you said it's just a simple RC filter, would be what is the relationship with the cutoff frequency and the capacitor, and what would you do to change this circuit to a low-pass filter?
Okay, so I can answer the second question right away. So you just flip the location of RNC, and you will get a low pass filter at the other value.
Do you know the formula?
Yeah, we have the time constant R times C. So if you and I'm kind of rusty on that.
So and so that would be, so if you said, no, I don't know the relationship with the capacitor, my follow-up question would be, do you know the formula, right? Because the formula is like the cutoff frequency is equal to like 1 over, I think it's like 2 pi, the resistance value times the capacitance value. So because it's the inverse, as the capacitance value goes up, frequency goes down. So that's kind of how an example of like how you would piece through that, right? If you didn't necessarily know what the relationship is, if you know the formula, you can almost figure it out by if the capacitance increases, what would happen to that frequency cutoff? It would get smaller.
But I think in that example too, the way you're kind of talking, just because it's so easy to want to just sit there and think about it and then give the right answer versus like the way we're talking through it. If you want to kind of show that thought process as you're working through.
Yeah, so, and then we'll jump into the second example, because I think it's more widely applicable. So hopefully this applies to all the majors and not just the EDs.
And one thing you'll see too, and I don't think it's necessarily unique to TI, and even if your major is kind of outside of that, ECE space, if you're an ME or, ChemE, whatever it may be, or not an engineer, just taking a step back and kind of looking at some of the basics, because, I think you hit on it perfect in that. It was like, it's been a while, right? Like, it was you probably first saw that like sophomore year, maybe, right?
Yeah.
So, just taking a step back and looking at a couple of functions, to where even if it's not the function, the question that gets asked, you could say, I don't know on that. I didn't know high pass for some reason, but I knew how to draw a low pass. You could maybe I talked through that and I get, some partial credit as we work through it. So, all right. So on this one, a little bit less of a circuit analysis question, but as Lindsay mentioned, we have like 80,000 parts in TI's portfolio. So what that means is, pick pretty much any electronic device. All of us in this room could probably design most of it with the parts in our portfolio. So one of the things that we look for is, hey, how do you understand maybe the subsystems, in a certain device? So in this example, we're going to look at a smartphone, and I just want to, kind of have, folks kind of shout out what might be in there, and think architecture, think what type of integrated circuits might be in a smartphone that you have. What was that? Antenna, yeah.
Sensors,
Okay, what kind of sensors?
touch sensor.
Okay,
Light sensor.
processor, light sensor, yep, cameras,
ADC DACs for the audio.
yeah, great. Filters, batteries, memory. Never enough of that. We don't sell that, but and think about the batteries too, right? What do you do with your phone with the battery? Well, you have to do at least probably once a day. So you may have, something in there that's going to do the charging, right? Something in there that's going to make sure that when you do the charging, the battery doesn't overheat, right? So you're kind of, thinking down the right track here. And so that's a question sometimes I'll ask folks is, pick something that and start telling me about what might be in there, right? And again, all of this, the theme you're seeing is thought process, right? When you hit a situation or a question you don't know the answer, how do you show your way of thinking to really show that you're driven and kind of motivated to kind of keep working through challenges to figure out what might be in the system.
Yeah, and this question in particular is highly applicable to our role working with customers, trying to design in as much as we can from TI to our customer systems, because we are the expert on our parts. We have customers that are the experts on what they're designing. So how we're able to understand their jobs makes it easier for us to understand what they care about as far as what kind of features our parts had for them. So one of the things I like to do when I'm thinking about a block diagram that I'd highly recommend if you guys are ever asked a question like this is to think about all the IOs, right? All of the things that you interact with in a device, whether you're plugging it in, whether you're touching it or whatever, how those things interact within the system, right? Why do you have a screen on your phone, right? It's to show you your videos. There's going to be that kind of, there's going to be the thing that runs your both the touch and the display, and then there's going to be all of the processing that happens on that unit, whether it's the audio. There's just like, pretty complex system. Do you want to go ahead and click to the side? Like we have on ti.com EERDs and
So we call these EERDs, but like end equipment reference design. And so I'll also put this out there because we were talking about this sort of at lunch, and I was like, I wish this was around when I was in school, because there are certain aspects of even my senior design project, because I'm more of a visual learner. Like I feel like I would have picked it up much faster, right? Because when I started at TI, had a lot of the courses that we talked about, but how all this stuff fit together in a system was kind of lost on me, right? Until I really kind of got that customer experience through our training programs. But yeah, we have, I mean, thousands, I would say, of end equipment reference designs, and it could scale across from smartphone to, anything in the automotive space, automotive subsystems in a car, electric vehicle, different types of industrial applications. But as you can see, I mean, you guys hit on a lot of, the functions that are in there, the processors, the sensors, the cameras. Having spent time in our audio business, I was proud of the DACs and ADCs comment for audio. But audio amplifiers, right? How do you drive, the speaker without damaging? I mean, as you can see pretty quickly, this gets to be a complex, pretty complex drawing of kind of what's in a cell phone, which, in my mind always seems so simple, right?
So he highlighted that we have all of these public, so if you go to TI's website, on the top bar, we have something that's applications. So under applications, we have all the sectors and then a bunch of different end equipment. So if you guys ever poke around and you want to maybe see what TI specs out as a block diagram for just about anything electronic, we have all block diagrams that are various levels of complexity. And then, the reason why TI does this is because if you get this on the website, if you clicked on one of these little blocks here, all of these dark blue things are things that TI sells. So it would then recommend parts to you. So we tried to make it as easy for our customers as possible to be able to look at a system of what we think they want in that system and then recommend parts to them. And then on that note, I think the joke in the semiconductor industry before I came to TI was that TI stands for the Training Institute, because there's probably, would you say, like 1 million hours of training material?
Oh, there's a lot, yeah.
I would probably more than 1 million hours of content for just about everything. So every kind of circuit, every kind of end equipment, every kind of design challenge, and it's all pretty well sorted, going all the way back to like the early 2010s. We have it all categorized there from our product experts. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good material we call our TI Precision Labs. And I would even recommend that, if you wanted to brush up on some of the skills, maybe that it's been a while since you've seen, good place to go. Also, if you're running into, challenges in terms of what you're working on, for one of your classes, sometimes it can just break it down in a little bit of a different way that maybe that clicks as well. But the whole intent of all of that content is really to have that for engineers to reference, to just continue to get a better understanding, right? We may be working with an engineer that's the power engineer, then on this given product, he or she is now responsible for doing maybe a different subsystem outside of power that they haven't done in a while, right? Okay, next slide. So I think we've talked about some of this. I'll hit a couple of these, especially if you're nervous or caught off guard. It happens to all of us, and it happens, like I said, I do a lot of the final round interviews for the field. And I would say probably 60 to 70% of the interviews, like it happens at one point. So just know that if you're in an interview and you get locked up and you get nervous and you're like, oh, I don't know what example I'm going to say or how I'm going to answer that, just taking a step back and even just saying, okay, give me just 1 second, let me think, right? And kind of just buying yourself some mental space to come up with something is a really good way just to work through that, right? And again, just don't feel alone. That happens to all of us, right? As you're working through that. So think of what we didn't cover here. I think we've hit on most of this. The last one, and again, this kind of came through in the humility comments that I made, but just always being open and honest about what you know, right? I've seen folks get into a trap of they just didn't want to admit they didn't know, and then they kept trying to explain their way out of something, and then the credibility just goes away, right? So I think just being very open, again, it's kind of counterintuitive. You feel like the interview's a test, you want to score 100%. And anything less than that, you're gonna beat yourself up probably when you walk out. But I think the honest truth is like having an opportunity to show that you don't know is actually can set yourself, apart from other candidates in a good way. Okay. Yeah, some of the closing questions we may ask, anything I should know about you that we didn't cover, tell me about an accomplishment you're most proud of, something like that, right? Not necessarily pertaining so much to the technical side here. But I think the key thing I want to hit on is come prepared with questions, right? I think the one pet peeve I guess I have is especially when somebody like I really like a candidate, I'm like, man, they would be a really good fit for TI. And then we get to the end and like, what questions do you have? And they're like, no, I'm good. See you later. I'm like, okay, right? It's a really good opportunity for you, again, back to, so much of this interview is you actually trying to determine, is this company a good fit for you, right? This is a really good space to have some of those questions prepared, whether it's around the culture, whether it's around the role, geographic flexibility, whatever it may be, to make sure that, you're going to be in a comfortable position, assuming it moves forward and you get an offer, you're going to feel really confident to go start there, right?
Yeah, and I think that is our last slide. And I think we just have Q&A. I would say that we have a lot of backup slides because I kind of assumed we would be close on time here. So there's a lot of backup slides that go through like another couple examples. So feel free to click through those if you're interested, but we'll go ahead and open it up to Q&A. If anybody has any questions for us, whether it be on anything we presented about our company, about advice that we have, experiences we've had, really, you can ask us anything. We're salespeople, so we get asked a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Do you have any business background?
From computer science?
Yeah.
Yeah, really good question. So, some of the opportunities will probably be in there, but Lindsey hit on the fact that we have an embedded processing portfolio specific to, you mentioned processors, but we've got processors, microcontrollers, wireless connectivity, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, Matter, if you've seen a lot of the new announcements for kind of smartphone space. So definitely an opportunity there to a little bit more on the kind of software side, in organizations like that. So absolutely.
If you may know, or mention some of the technologies in the software domain which you guys use, like which languages they use.
It's all over the place. To be honest with you, I mean, for us, it depends on the class of processor, right? So like, customer discussions I've had in the last month, a lot of, discussions around Android for a handful of customers, obviously Linux-based platform. You're going to have, a lot of microcontrollers we've come out with in the last, handful of years. Everything's kind of moved to a more centralized ARM core, right? So, you could be programming on, FreeRTOS or, real-time operating system, or basically just in the ARM environment as well. So it kind of depends on class of product and also what the customer's requirements are. That help answer?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, a lot of those like developing protocols, especially for the IoT space, are changing all the time. So TI is involved with a lot of those initiatives, whether it be like Fred, Matter. Matter wasn't even called Matter before, right? It was called like something else, like
BLE, like we're on the standards body for Bluetooth, and basically helping define a lot of the specs as well. That's not unique. A lot of semiconductor companies are on there because obviously the software decisions that get made and directly influence the hardware platform from a development standpoint.
yeah, so I think one of the reasons why they gave us this one of, I was told to bring 50, so there are 50 of them in the room, is it does go through like all the different engineering disciplines and what roles we hire for within those engineering disciplines. And it's definitely not strictly that. I think we hire a lot of applications people that come from all sorts of different backgrounds, because it's more about whether or not you have the like baseline understanding of how like engineering systems work, right? Like if you can step through an engineering problem, whether it's a chemical engineering problem or electrical engineering problem, the skill set of how to tackle a problem is often just as important as the actual content itself. And TI does a lot of training. So Denise is a
Yeah.
great example.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about that. I'll talk a little bit about that and also actually the question on the technical interview. I'm actually a chemical engineer in the field space, and so it's a little bit different. And this ties into, I think, the fact about being an engineering firm, this is we're problem solvers. So when we get the technical interview, again, you're not going to know everything. That is why we're engineers, we know everything before we can to know how to look at a problem and analyze it. And that's the biggest thing you have to convey. It's not getting the right answer. It's all about what are your steps and thought processes there. So for me as a chemical engineer, I design reactors, very different, but it still is still the same, looking at what my dead ends are and how to analyze that to push through. And so I think really going to thinking about those core skill sets that you get as an engineer to translate that into whatever the role is, whatever the interview questions are, and putting that into it as well. And we do a lot of technical training, they talk about what's available. That's something to also ask whatever employer you're talking to is what are you offering? What am I going to commit to on this time? What's your training structure like? That was huge for me as well, because I knew that if I'm going to go somewhere and working, I want to know what are they investing in me to be successful. They can't just put me in a position. So TI does a really good job of putting us in rotation programs to get a good skill set of not only our role, but where we play into the whole company to be successful. And I think that's really, really important to think about. What is it that you want to get your education? Only with your bachelor's degree, and when you get into your job and your role, that's really where you start learning and developing those skills.
Other questions? Yeah.
So the rotation program that you mentioned, if I'm an electrical graduate student, so the rotation program would be revolving around the IC design as a semiconductor, or would I experience the embedded system part of it as well?
Yeah, so it's going to be tailored towards what your end job function is. So like for a design role, you would probably, really spend time heavily focused on design across different design teams before then, kind of walking into your design role. For us on the field side, given that we work a lot with the different business units, the folks that kind of design the parts and help manufacture the parts, our rotations are more spending time in some of those functions so we can kind of understand how that works, but also a rotation in one of our field offices to where you're in front of customers a lot. Again, just to be able to kind of comprehensively tie it all together, versus just throwing somebody into the new role and saying good luck, right? So it's actually a really big investment. I think that question's a really good one because if you look at, I forget the numbers off the top of my head, but we've done analysis before on the amount of money on average TI will actually invest in somebody. And if you look at it, it takes a couple of years to actually, get that return on investment because we're very heavy on the front end to make sure that we want to enable success for everybody. It's just going to make us better as a company as well. Yeah.
Good methods to learn from the fail interview. Because every time I didn't get an offer, I just contact your director to ask why or not.
Yeah. So one idea, and you may get mixed feedback on this, but I have had folks ask at the end of an interview, hey, I don't expect you to tell me if I'm going to get an offer or not, but in general, what feedback do you have? Like if you were me leading this discussion, what would you go work on, or what would you think about maybe differently? So that there may be an opportunity there for you. It's so hit and miss. Like I know exactly what you're talking about because we, at least on our end, we will fill out the same thoroughness of a form in terms of feedback that basically our HR team and recruiting team will kind of give back to candidates, even if we don't extend an offer. But you're right though, it's like if the offer's not going, it's like everything kind of just goes quiet. So maybe just give some thought, towards the end of the interview, just to kind of ask, right, and see what sort of feedback you might get.
Yeah, I would also say that in that situation, like you already didn't get the offer, so you have really nothing to lose of really asking the person who's been your contact, right? Like, will you give me, some feedback as to why a different candidate was selected or what it is I could improve on to potentially reapply for this role in the future? Because the worst thing they can do is like say no or not answer you. right? And then what did you lose, really? And if that's their attitude, is that really a company you want to work for? To Morgan's point, I totally tattled on myself when I interviewed for TI because I did not think I did well in my technical interview. And my boss, who's now my boss, afterwards, had been the person I'd been interviewing with for the longest because it was the role he was hiring for. He called me after that interview and was like, "How do you think that went?" And I'm thinking, oh, he's going to tell me I bombed and that this is done. And I was really honest with him. I was like, I don't think he left that interview thinking I am technical enough for this job. And like he laughed and he didn't tell me I was wrong, but then I engaged with the person that had given me the technical interview later. And he's like, "Oh no, I didn't say anything bad about you. I thought you were fine." I was like, that was funny because I did.
Yeah.
And that respects the humility part, right? Like at the end of the day, it feels so impersonal interviewing, but we're all people, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why TI has the salespeople do recruiting and do interviewing is because so much of sales is selling the value of TI's products to your customer, right? But those same skill sets go into how you sell yourself to other people, right? Like you have inherent value. If somebody doesn't give you feedback, that's on them. Like that's bad on them. So don't be afraid to ask for that. You gave them your time in interviewing. They gave you consideration. They should be able to give you feedback on that.
Yeah, and I think it's fair for you to ask even the recruiting person you were working with from the company, because Lindsey makes a great point that it's an hour of both of our times, right? If I'm interviewing you, an hour is like if you have interviews throughout the course of a week, like that's a big time commitment. Like we as an employer, we owe that to you, in my opinion. I think it's so. There's one other question. Yeah.
Yeah, so in one of my interviews, I was asked like, do you have some topic which you are not very confident about? So in that case, what should I answer? Should I honestly tell them, okay, these are the like one or two topics I'm not really confident about? So answering this, will it make it seem like I am underprepared? Like saying that, okay, I don't know these topics so well?
I think the trick comes in of which topic do you pick, right? You gotta be careful to not pick something you're like, yeah, I know nothing about that, right? Next question. So, picking something maybe that you're actually, where my mind goes to is I would lean in on something that I'm trying to get better at, to where I have kind of an action plan behind some of the actions I'm taking to really go make progress, and then ground it in that and be like, hey, this is one particular area that I feel like is a bit of a weakness of mine. Here's what I've been doing, outside of the classroom, or here's a project that I signed up for that's honestly outside of my comfort zone to really try to stretch me to get more confident there.
Also, I really enjoy being contrary to most discussions I have because I think it brings out better engagement. I think in that situation, my feedback would be to say, I'm not sure I am as, I'm ready to tackle these kinds of questions. What kind of training do you guys do? Like, I'm not an expert on this, and it's clearly part of the role. This is my background. This is what I'm bringing to the table. How much are you willing to invest in training, and what does that training look like, right? Because it's, once again, I go back to the fact that there is no engineering school that can train someone for every single job they're applying. It is impossible. So you saying, this is my experience, here's how I can apply. I'm interested in this role. You tell me, how do you see this going as far as how I could get trained up to be able to do this? Because they're interviewing you for a reason. Have value. You can't be afraid to try to express that and ask for what you're validly going to need. They're going to have to train you. And if you started a company, you sit down the first day, no one says anything to you, I would fun.
Yeah.
As an international student, can I use my SPT as a training of because I always thought that OPT is like design or application is also.
I'm not familiar with OPT, to be honest with you, so we have to take that one down and get back to you.
I can tell you we do a lot of international hiring. I would say like a good percentage of our application people both work in India or are hired in India and here, same thing in like Asia. We have so many design firms. We have design locations everywhere.
For the new grade students.
Mhm. So I would
We
send,
have to follow up, because
we
I
can
know
use this card
we,
here, if you send me out, we can do this.
sponsorship is honestly a challenge. But like Lindsay said, though, we have, design sites in, multiple sites in China and in Shanghai and Shenzhen. We've got a big design site in Bangalore. Obviously, we've got Dallas, Santa Clara, like there's very much in Freising in Germany as well. And actually, Tel Aviv in Israel for the connectivity. So very much a global footprint, but I think as it pertains to like specific sponsorship, we should look into that. But,
Yeah, so are we planning to come up with any hardware support for the AI ML applications, as in precisely hardware accelerator fits on those parts?
So in general, the answer is yes, right? So we I would say if you go back a couple of years ago, we kind of took our foot off the gas probably on the embedded processing portfolio for ourselves. And that's been a key area that we've added a number of resources and I'll really invest a lot of money into. Actually, we were talking about this earlier, they've added over 180 resources in the last 6 months to really dig in, and 2 out of every those extra on the software side. But our goal is to have the hardware platform from an AI to also get basically for edge compute, right? To where we can actually have at the, if you take a smartphone application, at the sensor node itself, compute engine that you have a lot of power there without being, I guess, power hungry application. A lot of those things are battery powered. But then you also have kind of the cloud connectivity to kind of complete the ecosystem. So short answer is, yeah, AI is actually a really key area for us, both in the industrial side, as well as on the automotive side from a machine learning standpoint. Probably not, like you compare and look at like an NVIDIA or a Qualcomm, I think they're gonna be on the higher end. We're gonna be, like a little bit further back on that intentionally. So just because those investments are much more focused and much more narrow market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So also much more of the IoT domain and AI domain precisely.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
One more question? Anybody?
All right, so I have the business cards up here. If you guys, I have a couple more of these portfolios that really talk through some of the roles. But if you send me an email introducing yourself, I'll send you all the job postings. I already have it as like forward, so you'll get a response from me with our job postings.
Good luck.
Great talking to all of you. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn if you have any additional questions. You can email them to us as
I can't believe people
Everybody
join
on
that
Zoom,
late.
thank you.
It's like,
yes,
It's
thank
like
you.
happening the whole time. The
no,
other ones too.
why?
I don't know.
For
Catch
those on
the
LinkedIn
last
that did not get my card, you can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Can we end this?
Hi.
You just click end, you have to do anything.
Yeah.
Because it.